Came at the end of a long line of African American leaders who had been impressed by Gandhi, and King put it in a nutshell. He said it was Gandhi who taught him and African American leaders like himself that the love ethic of Jesus applied not just to interpersonal relations, but applied also to social and political life and could be used effectively as a political force. That was a transformation that King credited Gandhi with, and as you know, King, training for the ministry, obviously had to study Christian ethics, but it was precisely in his study of Christian ethics that he discovered that it was Gandhi who took this love ethic and applied it on a political and social scale. So I hope you don't mind if I read part of a paper that I have, because I do this for two reasons. First, because there are some complex ideas that print allows one to be more concise about. And the second, obviously, is that I would like as much time for discussion with you as possible. So I'll try to read this slowly. And again, if there's something that you want clarified, please don't hesitate to stop me, and I'll be happy to do it. So Gandhi's principle of satyagraha, or truth force, used so successfully in his campaigns for civil rights for Indians in white-ruled South Africa and in guiding India to independence after nearly 200 years of British rule, was grounded in a philosophy of peace, which goes much deeper than mere technique, strategy, or tactics, although it can and should be translated into tactics and strategy. In talking of his philosophy, however, it is important to stress that Gandhi was not a philosopher in the conventional sense of someone whose main activity consists in thinking in abstract terms about the nature of the world and one's place in it. Gandhi, on the contrary, was primarily a person of action, in Hindu terms, a karma yogi, that is, someone whose principal spiritual discipline was the way of action, a heightened sense of duty seen in spiritual perspective. Nevertheless, a coherent philosophy can be constructed out of his multifarious sayings and writings, but most of all, out of his life. In words of his that have become famous, quote, "My life is my message." In the current fixation on techniques of peacemaking, it is important to reiterate that the concept of peace for Gandhi goes far beyond the mere absence of war or violence. Nor is peace just a desired state of affairs, a lull between periods of conflict. Rather, peace for Gandhi had a comprehensive character, signifying both inner and outer peace. Inner peace comes from living a pure, well-ordered, and responsive personal existence, responsive in relation to the call of the divine, the cosmic, and the human forces in life. This deep inner peace finds expression in a calm and steadfast outer demeanor lived in the midst of socio-historical struggle and turmoil. Nonviolence always had an active character for Gandhi, which is why he considered passive resistance to be a very poor and misleading translation of satyagraha, or truth force, a notion that I shall explain more fully in the course of this presentation. This fusion of inner and outer peace is part and parcel of a way of life. The comprehensive character of peace for Gandhi accounts in part for the otherwise bewildering range of topics covered in the nearly 100 volumes of his collected works. Everything from truth care to theology, hygiene to mysticism, spiritual practice and celibacy to the arts of negotiation and diplomacy. And it's worth spending a minute to say that this man lived 14 to 16 hours in the throes of political action, and nonetheless, late in the night or early in the morning, still managed to write every single day. I mean, he edited 2 newspapers, and he kept a spiritual journal, and so these 100 volumes of his now collected works comprise that extensive writing and, of course, his speeches. But when you consider that was done at the end or at the beginning of a 16-hour day spent in political battle, you can see how disciplined he was. If one looks at the details of Gandhi's life, its priorities, the values it embodies, and the ideals it tries to achieve, one might be struck by the fact that most of Gandhi's time, both in South Africa and in India, was spent not in direct political activity, but in his ashrams, trying to establish and sustain model communities. Peace for Gandhi was not just a goal to be aimed at, but a means that contains and moves towards that very goal. There is no way to peace for Gandhi. Peace itself is the way. Given his comprehensive and inclusive understanding of peace, it is appropriate to focus this presentation on perhaps just 2, given the limits of time, 2 points. Namely, first, his critique of modernity issued from the viewpoint of, second, his fundamental ethical ideas and key moral concepts. In other words, what I'm trying to present is the sort of spiritual values and the philosophical grounding of this intense political and social activity. So, the first part of the presentation, Gandhi's critique of modernity. In November 1909, on his return by ship from London to South Africa, after an unsuccessful lobbying mission in London, Gandhi had what commentators have described as a profound experience of illumination comparable to Rousseau's, the young Rousseau's, on the road to Vincennes. Many of the ideas, thoughts, and feelings that had accumulated over the previous 20 years, because Gandhi lived for roughly 20 years in South Africa before he returned to India, many of these feelings that had accumulated over these 20 years ripened and came to a head. In 10 days on board the ship Kildoan Castle, he produced 275 manuscript pages, written at such a harrowing pace that when his right hand got tired, he plodded on with his left hand. Years later, looking back at the experience, Gandhi wrote, quote, "Just as one cannot help speaking out when one's heart is full, so also I had been unable to restrain myself from writing the book since my heart was full." End of quote. The book that Gandhi produced with such a sense of urgency and mission was Hind Swaraj, or Indian Home Rule, as the book came to be known in English. As Anthony Perel, in his new edition of this text, remarks, quote, "Hind Swaraj is Gandhi's seminal work. It was through this that he hoped, as Gandhi put it, quote, in Gandhi's own words, to use the British race for transmitting his mighty message of ahimsa to the rest of this world. It was to this text that he returned throughout his career as if to the source of his inspiration." I should say, just in passing, that when Gandhi thought in 1909 that the British race might be a privileged agency to spread this message, he had not yet sort of fully experienced the British, at least as they ruled in India. Towards the end of that time in India, he perhaps inclined more to the feeling of a colleague of his who felt that the sun never set on the British Empire because God did not trust the British in the dark. The context within which Gandhi wrote Hind Swaraj sheds light on his intentions in writing the book. While in London, he met a number of Indian intellectuals, including V.D. Savarkar, one of whose supporters, Nathuram Godse, would later assassinate Gandhi. These intellectuals, Gandhi found, were all enamored of modern Western civilization, even while they decried colonialism. Gandhi pointed out to them the contradiction in their position. namely that colonialism itself was a logical consequence of modern civilization, insofar as its economic engine drove it to seek sources of cheap labor and raw materials and markets for its expanding industrial production. Furthermore, Gandhi disagreed with Savarkar and others about the means by which freedom and independence for India should be attained. They, that is the anarchists, favored violence and terrorist tactics. Indeed, one of Savarkar's friends, Madan Lal Dhingra, had, in July 1909, assassinated the political aide-de-camp to Lord Morley, the Secretary of State for India. For Gandhi, by contrast, such nationalist violence was connected with the instability of the modern West and was both impractical and undesirable. Impractical because the British were vastly better armed, and undesirable because in taking up arms, India would be adopting the worst features of Western civilization, as Gandhi saw it. Quote, "To arm India on a large scale is to Europeanize it. Then her condition will be just as pitiable as that of Europe. Whom do you suppose to free by assassination? The millions of India do not desire it. Those who are intoxicated by the wretched modern civilization, they alone think these things." End of quote. The stimulus of these encounters with Indian anarchists, together of course with Gandhi's own experience of British culture, both during his student days in London and in South Africa from 1893 onwards, provided the occasion for him to collect his thoughts and reflect systematically about the course of Western modernity after having spent nearly 20 years in the West. He had certain advantages in this enterprise. As one belonging to a colonized country, and to an oppressed minority in South Africa, he was able to discern the darker face of modern civilization. Furthermore, as one who brought to this encounter with the West the values of a quite different civilization, he was able to see the West through Indian eyes and uncover its hidden impulses, drives, and contradictions. There is, of course, some irony in the critique that Gandhi essays in Hind Swaraj. When Gandhi first came to England, he himself was quite enamored with British culture. In light of Winston Churchill's later sneer about Gandhi, calling him that half-naked fakir, Churchill's colorful description of Gandhi in a loincloth, it is amusing to read about Gandhi's sartorial adventures, his Savile Row suits and his cane when he first came to Britain, and his attempts at trying to become a British gentleman. Longer acquaintance with the culture and deeper reflection allowed him to see through the surface glamour. And while he always maintained a deep respect for certain aspects of Western civilization, its scientific temper, its energy and spirit of enterprise, its organizational skill and civil liberties, for example, he began increasingly to see it as materialistic, soulless, and fundamentally violent towards both nature and human life. In Hind Swaraj, for example, Gandhi comes out with a long list of evils spawned, as he sees it, by the modern industrial system. He ties together his critique of the economic system with that of its technological underpinning.